right. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good evening. Welcome to our last Bicep community call of the year. We have some pretty cool demos today, so stay tuned. Here is our team. Yeah, nothing has changed. Core maintainers, nothing has changed as well. So we'll move on to what is the community call for. Like I said, every month, this is for you, not for us. So you'll get updates on topics we might not cover in our own calls. We have this every month, so you'll keep getting more and more recent updates since we don't have calls that often. So please use the chat. If you have any questions, raise your hand or put them in the chat. We have most of our engineers here, our PMs, myself and Alex, and we'll answer whatever questions come up. But please raise your hand if you want to also ask us directly. We have a questions and answers portion at the end, so if you want to wait till the end, you can do that as well. All right, Alex?
Okay, for the O.13 release, so it is going to be our last release of the year. We probably won't do one, right at the beginning of January. We'll probably push that out a little bit, but I guess I'll talk about that in a second too. For the release that's going to go out tomorrow, we're close to tomorrow. We released a preview of custom types support. So Johnny's going to demo this today, and we have really basic documentation just so you can get started with it. You have to opt into the preview feature, which I think Johnny's going to demonstrate as well with the Bicep config file. There's a new property for enabling experimental features. This is really cool and very powerful, and excited to see what people do with it. So you can start to play around with it in the next release. There was a bug for doing deployments to government clouds or other sovereign clouds, not the public Azure regions. A bunch of people had reported this one, so this got resolved. So I just wanted to share that. And then number 3, the get secret function. It used to be that you couldn't use get secret within a ternary expression. So if you wanted to conditionally choose a secret from a key vault or set it to some other value for whatever reason, you were blocked from doing that. Mikolai was able to get this one done. Thank you for those who re-raised the importance of the issue here. So we were able to get that done, I think, easier than we were expecting to. So that's always nice when that happens. For future releases, not a ton of changes here. For the next O.14, which it says January 1st, but it won't be. We're in the late stages. The Kubernetes provider is basically done. So we're waiting on some ARM service deployments, which get really tricky at the end of the year because we do a lot of code freezes. So it's code complete, and we're just kind of nursing some of these rollouts out the door. So hopefully it'll get out in the next 2 weeks, but can't say for sure. We also have in progress completions for module registry references. So this has been a frequent ask since we released the registry capability all up. You don't get any IntelliSense, so you have to know kind of exactly what you need to do a registry reference. So this is going to give you IntelliSense in exactly the way that you expect. You'll have IntelliSense for which registry you want to choose from and any aliases, and then which repository, and then which version. So it should just work the way that you expect, and we're excited to get this one done. The next kind of big thing that is on our radar and is close to getting started in earnest are these build and decompile APIs. And this is, again, to support portal-based Bicep workflows. So you want to export as Bicep, deploy as Bicep, and so on and so forth. This is what we need, this build and decompile APIs. So hopefully we'll be getting that done soon. The rest, the O.star and the 1.0 has not changed at all. So kind of the same story on those things that we're trying to get done before 1.0 or by 1.0. I think we can go to the next slide.
Yes, sorry.
No worries.
Okay, Johnny, would you like to share screen, take over?
Sure. So okay, can everybody see VS Code?
Yeah, we can do this.
Okay, so the feature I'm going to be demoing is user-defined types. This is something that you have to opt into. So in your bicep config.json for a given folder, there's an experimental features enabled top level property, and you can turn this one on by setting user-defined types to true. There is some autocomplete here, so you don't need to remember exactly what this feature is called. Okay, so once you've turned that on, if you are writing a module, like this one is for a storage account, let's see, one sec.
It's an object.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So if you have a module that is defining a storage account and you want to parameterize this today, you need to take in individual fields as individual parameters. So if we wanted, a storage account name, we could take in a string and then refer to that here. And if we wanted a storage account SKU, we could take in a separate string and maybe say, we'll only allow standard LRS here. And then part of that. But as you can see, this can sometimes lead to stuttering on the names for parameters and some repetition. So
Johnny, can
Hey,
you
Johnny.
zoom
Sorry.
in?
Oh,
Yeah. No, go
yeah,
ahead, Stephanie.
I was going to say the same thing. Can you zoom in really quickly?
I think if you just make the editor a little more landscape, that'll probably fit better. Yeah, perfect.
Perfect. Yeah.
okay. So one potential solution here is instead of taking in individual parameters for each field, you can take in an object. So if we took in a storage account config, today the best you can do is say object and then trust that your caller is going to provide the right information. But with the user-defined types feature enabled, you can define individual individual properties here and specify what kind of type would be accepted there. All right, and then we'll just update how we're referring to these particular things. We're on. Okay, so because this is a well-defined object, we get autocomplete after typing the name of the object dot. We'll get the names of properties. Those will autocomplete for us within the particular module that we're writing. And then because the parameter itself is strongly typed, if we use this module in a different template, we will get autocomplete for that as well. So here we're being told, well, we're being told a couple of things. So first, let's say hard code location. And we're being told that we're missing the name and SKU properties of the storage account config. So when we fill those in, we'll get autocomplete there as well. That will happen both for property names and for enums that will autocomplete the value as well. This is probably most useful for objects, but within a template, you can define string properties, enum properties, integer properties, array properties. You can define reusable symbols using the type keyword. So if you wanted to have just, if you were taking in a large number of storage account SKUs in different places, you could define a storage account SKU type. And specify which SKUs you wanted to accept there. And then that symbol can be reused in either parameter definitions, or if you wanted to define a standalone object and reuse that one as well. Once you've defined an object symbol or any type symbol like that, it can be used as the type clause for a parameter statement. So immediately following the name, where today you would be able to say array, object, string, int, bool. With this feature turned on, you can refer to your own types that you define within that same template. There's some basic documentation of, and I think Alex posted a link to that in the chat. And that was what I had for the demo.
And we can take some time to answer questions. There's a lot going on in the chat. Johnny, clearly people are very excited for this feature, which is not surprising. I do want to just add some context, and it's in the bottom of the gist that Johnny wrote up. But one of the things that this is foundational to a lot of other future features, is what I'm trying to say. So there's a lot that we can potentially do with sharing of types in a registry. So if someone wants to invent a type library with custom type definitions for whatever reason, we could do things like that. We can have a type of operator so that you can, instead of redefining all of these types of existing Azure resources, you can point to specific properties and we can just basically replicate that type over to a custom type. So there's all sorts of really cool stuff that we can do that will hopefully be really helpful to doing a lot of things. But one of the things that we'll be able to do is make module sharing and module libraries much richer and much more toolable, which is exciting because that's not something we really have a good way to do today.
Johnny, I have a question. This type of definition would work with load JSON content.
Nikolai, you're quiet again.
Yeah, sorry. Would this work with load JSON content, like defining types from a?
I don't believe so, because load JSON content is today only loading JSON values. So as I understand it, when you do load a JSON value, we deep inspect the content of that file and can autocomplete referring to specific portions of that file. But because it's a value and not a type, it doesn't interact directly with this feature, at least not yet.
Yeah, right. So it would not be an object, so there would not be string or so. It would be just like values. Yeah, right. That looks similar. It's not that.
Okay, and I did see a couple of questions about how does this work with things in the registry. I should mention the types that you define in your Bicep template get compiled down. So they are part of the ARM template that gets emitted. I can show you what this looks like. I'll just share very briefly again. So this same module we were working on, if we compile this, so a couple of things to call out here. So first of all, there is a language version property at the top level, which is used whenever we're dealing with an experimental feature. So this is required for the things that I'm going to point out to work, but it also is just warning you that everything you're seeing is subject to change. And we've included a warning in the template level metadata as well. So there's a separate top level property called definitions that will have properties for each type statement that occurred in the template. So here we have like type storage account SKU, and then type for the storage account config. Those are represented here. The syntax for how you define what properties are expected, which ones are required, is very closely based on JSON schema, but is compatible with the ARM type definitions as they exist today. So essentially, this union type gets expressed as a string with a set of allowed values. But because this is actually shipped off with your template, it will be enforced by the ARM runtime. And I don't believe this will work today with 0.12, but when we load your JSON template from the registry, that type information will be available to the compiler. Okay, and apparently I have to stop sharing to look at the chat again, see if there are any other questions. So Chris is asking about the decompiler. There's no decompiler support yet. That will happen before this comes out of preview, but it's not present at the moment. Okay, it looks like there are a lot of questions, and I think Stephanie only put me down for 5 minutes, so I'm going to try to answer as many as I can in the chat.
Sure, yeah, and we might have extra time at the end, so if anything, we could talk more about it during this portion at the end as well.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, thanks, Johnny. All right, I'm going to move back to the PowerPoint. And we have a pretty exciting topic here. Jack, are you here?
I am indeed.
Perfect. Feel free to take over the PowerPoint if you can. But
yeah, I will share away and we will give it a go. Give me 2 seconds.
Great, sounds good.
Let's see if Teams is going to behave. Okay. Okay, cool. So yeah, so thanks for having me first of all. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Jack Tracy. I'm one of our cloud solution architects in the customer architecture and engineering team. As you may gather from the accent, it is I'm from the UK, and if I stumble or mumble, it's very late here. It's 9:20, and I've just got back from a customer on site, so I'm off the back of a 3-hour drive. So I'm just getting back with it. So bear with me. I work in the team that's mainly responsible for helping our field and unblocking complex scenarios. And also, we are the team that's responsible for our Azure landing zones guidance. So if any of you have been dealing with Azure landing zones, you've probably seen my face around the GitHub repositories because that's my day-to-day job, and that's what I look after on a day-to-day basis. Today, we're going to talk around a new thing that we've created, and I'll move on to the next slide, which is our landing zone vending modules. So when we've been building Azure landing zones over the last few years, and sort of 2-3 years, our guidance has been out around Azure landing zones or enterprise scale, as you may have originally known it. We realized a gap, right? And it's around creating those subscriptions. And we'll come on to that a little bit more in a second. But we've released these 2 sets of modules. So there's a Bicep version available and a Terraform version available. And they both do exactly the same in terms of they allow you to create subscriptions via the infrastructure as code language of choice, and allow you to do things like creating a subscription, putting in the correct management group, creating a virtual network within that new subscription, connecting it and peering it to an existing vWAN hub or a virtual network that exists, doing your DDoS, your custom DNS, and then also allowing you to apply role assignments to that subscription or lower scope, so like the resource group or the individual resource inside of that subscription, for example. And then resource locks and tags, right? So we're just helping you provision those subscriptions to hand over to your application and development teams from a platform team's perspective, with all the sort of infrastructure components that they need to get going from a platform perspective. So before we dive much further, just did a bit of a way to really sort of reset and get everybody on the same page around landing zones. So Azure landing zones is this sort of enterprise control plane, right? We're setting up things like management groups, policies, RBAC, monitoring, hub networking, all of those things that you need as shared services. Good way to think of it is about utility services for a city, right? Before you build anything in a city, you need water, gas, electricity to be able to support the buildings and the people living within that city. Azure landing zones is pretty similar for your Azure workloads. You need all these shared services components in place to be able to grow your workloads at scale. And we have these 3 definitions of landing zones that you can see from our documentation. If you head to aka.ms/ALZ, you'll find documentation on all of this. But we deem there's 3 different types of landing zones, right? There's the ones that are centrally managed, which, you know, typical IT teams will create, deploy, manage everything within them, and the business will just consume them. There's tech platform landing zones, which could be things like Azure VMware Solution or AKS, where it's a platform that people are managing as itself. So they're managing the VMware cluster as itself. They're potentially managing a shared AKS cluster. There's a team looking after those things. And then additional teams are deploying workloads onto those services. So they're deploying things into the VMware clusters, they're deploying things onto the AKS clusters, and then obviously delivering their application to the business. And then there's this third type, right, which is sort of what we see more commonly now in this move towards sort of a decentralized operating model, where you've got workload landing zones, where we're literally handing a very blank subscription to the end user, to the application, to the development teams, and going, hey, go and deploy what you need to deliver the application and the value to the business. But we're going to govern you from the Azure landing zone control plane beneath. And some of you, and hopefully many of you, have seen this diagram. It's burnt into my brain especially, but this is the Azure landing zones conceptual architecture. And when we're talking around landing zones here from that last slide, we're talking around this piece highlighted in red here. So we're talking about how do we create these at scale via infrastructure as code, and as part of our sort of platform pipelines that we use to manage the rest of Azure landing zones, to be able to just control all of that as code instead of having to have any manual steps and, you know, people going into portals and creating things like that. So why, right? Like, we heard loud and clear that we do a pretty good job of helping accelerate the platform landing zones, so Azure landing zones. And we obviously have the Bicep implementation of that, which is really successful as well. So go and check that out if you've not seen it before. And I've seen Zach's just posted a link in the chat, so thank you, Zach. And we do a really good job of the final piece, right, of helping you deploy the workload and the things, like the actual resources, into subscriptions. But there's a big gap in the middle. We don't help you accelerate this piece in the middle, which is you've got your platform, you know what you want to deploy into it, and we can help you do that piece, but we don't help you create the subscription that sits in the middle. And, you know, that initial vend of creating networks, peering it back to a central hub and all those sort of things. And this is exactly where this solution fits, right? And this is exactly why we've created what we're going to create. Now, I will get into a demo in a second, but if some of you are new to Azure landing zones, or you're wondering, well, how is this really a problem? Like, how many subscriptions should I have? Like, we have this principle in Azure landing zones called subscription democratization, and we've created a YouTube video to talk about this. So if you want to hear more of my voice, you can go and listen to 10-15 minutes where me, Matt, and Kevin, who are all part of the ALZ sort of maintenance team, where we talk around how you should carve up your subscriptions and what you should be looking to do, and the decision criteria as to when to group workloads together and when to maybe split them out, all in alignment with the Azure landing zones architecture. And just as the final bit of slideware before we get into a demo, I just want to give you the sort of idea. So if I move to the laser pointer, you know, when you're thinking about an Azure landing zone journey and for a customer going through this, first of all, you need to create these platform subscriptions to be able to have things like the connectivity, the management, the identity subscriptions to host these shared components in. You then need to actually build the platform, and we have a number of options. You know, we have a portal experience, the Bicep modules, the Terraform module for doing that. Then we have this piece here, which is the new bit we're going to talk about today, and we're talking about now. And then we have our workload accelerators, right? And as you can see, there's a number of accelerators on here, and there's a number of people on the call who I know have been influential in building these accelerators. AKS for being one is very popular. The AVD one is another very popular accelerator. So is the AVS one. But we're talking around how do you accelerate this part of your deployment journey. Now, you could say you want to actually create these platform subscriptions with the landing zone vending modules, and you absolutely could do that. I think all we're calling out here is you need to just think about how that's sequenced, right? Because there is dependencies on things existing before you can then run your platform. So it might be a bit of a chicken and egg scenario. It just needs a little bit of thinking about. It's definitely possible. We see people do it, but just think about your dependencies when you're doing that. If you're building it all in sort of one pipeline and one sort of single click approach. So enough of slides. Let's get into an actual demo. So before I dive into a demo, let's go and show you the repos and show you where things live. So you should be able to get on the short links there. And let me just change sharing to my other screen. All right, hopefully you can all see that. So if you head to the short link, so aka.ms/lz-vending/bicep, you'll hit to this repo, and as you can see, we have everything in here that you would need to know. So I think the first call out as well, which is a great thing for us, is this module is also available in the Bicep module registry. So if you were to go to the Bicep registry modules repo, you will find this module here available. With the same set of guidance that you would find in our documentation in the repo, and with a number of examples on how to use this for different scenarios, right? So whether you need no networking, whether you want hub and spoke, virtual WAN, or whether you want to use it with an existing subscription as well, right? Because we see that as a potential use case where people may have already created subscriptions, but they still want to manage them, put them in management groups, vend networks into them, do all that sort of stuff. They just don't want to create it initially, and that's absolutely possible as well. So you can set all those things. So back to our main repo, you'll see the bits and pieces that we do here and links off to various pieces of documentation. We do have a sort of constraint where we need you to be on Bicep version 0.11.1 and later, because we use the metadata template metadata extensively for our documentation. So we need you guys to use that one. In terms of the rest of it, a lot of our documentation is actually contained within our wiki. So if I just head to our wiki, you'll see when I get past the SSO. So you'll see that we talk around this here, right? So we talk about creating platforms, we're talking around the piece in orange here about deploying landing zones, and we give you a brief overview. Now, we detail all the permissions that are required based on the things that you're going to be doing and what you want to touch and how to create this, how to set up the service principal and the permissions to actually create the alias resource based on, if you're creating it against an EA or an MCA, and we link to the documentation that already exists for these things. So if you're looking to get those bits set up, all the documentation's here, and if you're struggling, please feel free to create an issue. We absolutely can help you out there and look to improve the guidance if it's not clear enough in the existing documentation. But we list out all of the permissions that you're going to need and what's being required here. We have some known issues documented in the Bicep one, which is mainly around VNets and subnets, which I know is a hot topic, and everybody's very eager to get solved, but just calling that out here. So in this module, we don't actually allow subnets to be created today. However, with custom types that's just been sort of formally announced, we may look to start adding some more support for that, because it'll be easier to type out in complex objects, as we've called out here. But we'll see. I've literally just seen that for the first time myself, so we'll need to go and do some investigation work with that. But again, if you have any issues around this, please do raise an issue on the repo. We'd love to hear from you, even if it's like we know it just adds to feedback that we can work with people like in the engineering team to escalate this issue and drive it forward. And then we have a couple of some guidance around how to consume this module, right? So there's a multitude of ways to consume this module as we list here. Obviously our preference is use the Bicep registry because you don't have to do much. You just literally type it out, and that's what we'll be doing in the demo in a second. But you could choose to fork this. There's a custom action we've written. Go and read this documentation to your heart's content. There's lots here. And then most importantly, we have some examples, right? And we have some 3 common scenarios that we see today. But if you do think there's one missing or you can't work it out, let us know, raise an issue. We'll happily go and create more content for you. So today, let's go through the hub and spoke example. And before I click on the hub and spoke example, let's just go back and look at the parameters. So you may be wondering, well, what's in here, right? Everything in the module is optional. So you can turn on the management group placement part, or you can turn it off. You can turn on the hub networking, you can turn it off. Sorry, you can turn off the networking or the peering. Everything is optional. Everything's configurable by the parameters. And all of our parameters are listed out here, documented out. Now they're in a table, but they're also down here in form and with detail around what's expected, example parameters. So when you get something like the billing account, it tells you what we're sort of expecting and what it should look like. And there's an example in the parameter file at the bottom as well. So everything's defined down here. And obviously, every use case you should be thinking of, there should be a good example from here for you to take as copy and paste and amend to what you need. In terms of going back to our wiki and taking that hub and spoke example, which we'll use in the demo, if I take hub and spoke, you'll see that we now have the Bicep module registry version in here. So you could literally copy this, change the values, and away you go. As long as you can access the public registry and you're not doing this offline, then you'll be able to get to that. And obviously we've got the ARM JSON file, the parameter file in JSON if you want to use that as well, if you're still deploying that way as well. So let me switch sharing to VS Code, which is this one. And let's go into the demo. So in true Blue Peter fashion, which is definitely a UK reference, here's one I did earlier. So I've copied in the module and I'm using it from the public registry. And I've set some of my values, right? So I've set my billing scope to an enrollment, which is an EA I have. I've set the alias and the subscription display name that I want to be created. I've added some tags. And as you can see, there's a number of other properties here that are listed with all the details that you need that I haven't specified. But we're going to be creating a virtual network, peering it to a hub virtual network that already exists as a second part. So I'll add that in a second. But this one out of the box will create a new subscription with a production type, so not a dev test subscription. It will move it into this specified management group here because we've enabled the flag, and we've said put it in this management group ID called test LZ vend, which I'll show you in a second. We're going to create a virtual network that's going to be in UK South. This is its name, what its address space is, some tags, and the resource group that it's going to live within as well. And we have options here to enable locks and stuff like that. So if I looked for locks, I could enable resource group locks on the virtual network if I wanted to or not. And that does default to true. So actually, I might just set this to false because I don't want that lock to exist. So if I open up PowerShell here and let me just copy some stuff I did earlier because it's late here. So if I pop that in here, so it's a management group scope deployment. And I'm targeting this against my tenant root management group, but you could target this against any other management group. It doesn't really matter. It's just the one I've chose to pick in this one. Using this demo1 bicep file, and I'm naming my deployment bicep call 1. So we'll kick that off and wait for the deployment to start, and then we'll flick to the Azure portal and watch it through. Any questions? My chat has crashed, so feel free to shout them out whilst we're going along.
Yeah, if anyone wants to raise their hand as well. Sorry, Alex, I think, were you going to say Whit's question?
Yep, but go for it. Or if Whit just raises his hand, he can.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I guess, does this have a solution to more region-locked resources like key vaults not being able to be accessed by resources in other regions?
So I'm not sure I fully understand the question there, Whit. Do you want to just give me a little bit more?
So yeah, for example, if I've got say a key vault in one resource group, I spin up a managed service fabric cluster in the same resource group, works fine. I try and put them in two separate resource groups, it will fail because they're required to be in the same resource group. Does this try I guess alleviate that to some extent to prevent me from doing that, or would this I guess I'm not clear what problem this is solving.
Yeah, so this is more, and it's a great question, right? And I think that maybe is me doing a bad job of pitching what this is. So give me 2 seconds and let me flick back to the documentation, and hopefully the deployment is kicking off so we can kill 2 birds in 1 stone. So this is really addressing the problem of we need to create subscriptions to give to our teams to be able to deploy their resources into. So we're not really saying these are the only resources you're ever going to need inside of your subscription to the application teams or development teams or anybody who's consuming Azure within the organization. We're saying there's some stuff that we need to do in terms of setting up your networking and connecting it back to our centralized hub based on our maybe Azure landing zones or our general landing zone governance structure. And this is where we're trying to address that problem. So this is primarily focused at platform teams who are enabling the shared services in Azure for teams to use, and vending subscriptions for those application teams. So it's addressed at that. So this is not a replacement for all of your deployments. Absolutely not. Carry on using Bicep however you're consuming it today. This is just to give you that subscription from a platform team perspective, so you can go and put those resources in it.
Okay, so this is more of a ready-made template of sorts that is safe for other people. So when they spin up resources, they can connect to the resources and the other subscriptions. I guess could this also be used as a template for multi-region managed I forget what you call them, the managed service applications? Setting up multiple regions for those.
So today, this module can't be used to deploy into multiple regions. It's something we know that we need to address, where we need to support deployment of virtual networks to multiple regions and multiple resource groups for those regions. But today, that's not something we have in the module, but it's on our backlog to create. But you can create whatever you want in these subscriptions, right? There's nothing special about these subscriptions. It's just treat it as you've signed up new to Azure, you've got a brand new subscription. This is just a way to help you vend those subscriptions for more enterprise customers that are governing the creation of those.
Okay, thank you.
No worries. All right, so I can see the deployment has hopefully kicked off. So let's kick that off, and I can see some questions in the chat now. My chat is back. So yes, you can lock the network resources. There's an option to lock the resource group or lock the individual VNet as well. It's all parameterized. So yes, you can do that. Let's go in here and see if we've got a deployment that's kicked off. Does the vending machine deal with accounts? No, so it doesn't create any of the EA constructs in terms of accounts and stuff like that. It just creates the subscriptions within an account. So you need to create an account first and target the SPN to that, and off it will go. Let's see. So it looks like it's actually, and so here's the initial deployment. And it creates another sub deployment to deploy the resources into. So this one I've got AZ mask turned on. So this one creates the initial subscription. So we can see it kicked off the sub create and that completed, and then it started vending resources into this subscription. So if I just quickly refresh my browser to hopefully get the subscription in there, and then we should be able to hopefully see this subscription if I go here. I might need to change my filter. I do. Oh no, I don't hear it. So sub Bicep community call deployment. So this is the new subscription we created. We can see it's part of the test LZ vend management group, and we can show that from the management group's experience here. So if we go to management groups and test LZ vend, we can see our new subscription exists here. If we go into that subscription and we click in resource groups, you'll see that we have our resource group as we defined, and we have our virtual network. And it's not peered because we didn't enable that option, but it's got the address space that we set, 192.168.10/24. And as you can see, there's no peerings here. And if we look, you'll see that the tags have applied at the various levels, and we've used different tags throughout. So you can set tags at varying levels. So if you look at the resource group, the tags are different here, and at the subscription level, those tags are again different. So you can set those all here. The tags at the subscription and the resource group level are merged. So if you put in overlapping values, it will merge them together and take whatever's in the module as in your inputs as preference. And yeah, that's about it really. I suppose any questions? I see a hand up from Kevin.
Yeah, just a quick question around the peering, just because you mentioned it there. So will this handle the peering for both sides from the hub and the LZ?
Correct. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. So
So
you
you'll
need
have
to
to put
ensure
in
you've
what
got
your,
permissions when you run this on both sides. So your sales principal will need permissions on both sides, obviously, to create that. But yes,
great,
you only
okay,
need to provide the target that you're trying to peer to from this subscription, and it will do both sides. And the same for vWAN. If you're peering it to a virtual WAN hub, it will create the connection for you as well.
all right, lovely, thank you.
Right. And yeah, let's just go through that very quickly. If we go back to the parameters, which are down here. Actually, let's just look at it from the Bicep registry module. So yeah, here we go. We've got hub and spoke example down here with some peering. So as you can see, you just set this hub network resource ID parameter to, in this example, it's a virtual network, and that will create both sides. And if you wanted to do that for vWAN, it's the same parameter. We do some clever looking up behind the scenes, depending on what's in the resource ID. So if it detects this, it knows it's doing a virtual WAN connection, and if it detects the Microsoft.network/virtual networks, it knows it's doing a VNet peering connection. So we handle that all within the module, but same parameter input, so you can't do a connection to both because that's not supported. All right, any other questions before I hand back to Stephanie and the team? I would highly invite you to go and check it out. Give us your feedback. We really want to hear from you. If there's things missing, let us know. Right, this came out about a month ago, and we're still, we've got lots of customers using this, but feel free to keep using it. Let us know your feedback, and feel free to contribute as well. Right, it's an open source project, so feel free to get involved.
Thank you so much, Jack.
No worries. Back to you.
All right, if we have no questions, we have a couple more things to talk about today. And if you have any questions, you can definitely put it in chat or wait until the Q&A at the end. Okay, back to the PowerPoint. Second. Not sure if Jackie wanted to go through these slides.
I think I went through those at the beginning, so all
Okay,
good.
perfect. Sounds good. Right. I will pass this over to Jeannie.
Thank you, Stephanie. Hello, everyone. I'm Jeannie Benedict from Azure Research for Bicep. I wanted to invite you to a couple of different experiences. The first thing is we have a program in Azure called Azure Experience Insiders. It helps us shape the future of Azure, and it's where we invite you to be part of our community. All you have to do to join the community is click on the link, and we'll also post it in the chat. But if you join the Azure Experience Insiders, or AXI as we like to call it, community, then you'll get a newsletter every month, and it will have opportunities for you to actually participate in research. And the research can be things like, it could be a survey, it could be a panel with other people, it could be something where you're seeing a product before it goes out to help us change and influence the design of that product. And it's really a way for you to make sure your voice is heard, and we listen, and we use that information to make the product better. So the first experience here is to join the community. If you do join the community for Azure Experience Insiders, you also will get opportunities for other areas of Azure, not only just Bicep, but Bicep is included, and you will be tagged, if you will, so that we know you're part of the Bicep panel. So that's our first opportunity. I'm going to ask you to go to the next slide and talk about one study that we currently have. So we really want to hear from you. So we're trying to understand and work on what it's like and the experience that you're going through when you actually test or validate code with Bicep. So we have a study that'll be going on for the next month or so, where we want you to take the time to talk to us about how you validate, what you need to validate, what you like, what you don't like, any tools you may be using, but basically help us understand the experience. And so here, this is just a screener so that we can understand where you're coming from. And if you're selected and you want to participate, then I'll contact you later. But there's an AKA link here that you can click on to take like a 2-minute screener so that we will have a way to contact you. And in general, if you have feedback that you'd like to give us and around our studies, or if you want to talk to Microsoft Research for Bicep, there's an email alias down below, Bicep Research, that you can always reach out and we can listen to that. It's not a support channel, but it really is about influencing, changing the product and making sure that we can align to your needs as we go forward. So each community call, I'll be representing and showing you some of the opportunities that are going forward and remind you to join the actual panel. So that's it, Stephanie. Thank you for allowing me to share this with the group.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if I can just triple underline the please help us with this Bicep testing research by filling out the screener. I think this is some research we have been anticipating doing for some time now, and seeing what the testing story for Bicep code really should look like ideally, and what are some quick wins and what are some long-term things that we can start to think about. So hopefully we'll have quite a few people fill this out, and we can reach out to you to discuss this more.
Right, thanks, Alex. And it looks like what you said, you've been part of the community. Do you mean the Bicep community or this Azure Experience Insiders community? Because
Well, I clicked your link and it signed me in and it said I've been a part of it since June, but I swear I don't think I've seen a single email about it.
Yeah, this program has been around for a while, the Azure Experience Insiders program, and it has been there for a while. So maybe you have been a part of that in Azure. So if you've already been a part of that, all this will do when you come in is give you an attribution that you're using Bicep. So that'll be fine. So some of you may already be in the program, which is fantastic. If you're not part of the program, then please sign up. But if it says you're there, then you will get the newsletters going out probably early next week. So you'll see one, and you'll see this particular study that I just spoke of as one of the opportunities to join up. And again, if you find that something's not going right with the sign up, or you have questions, you can let us know in the chat, in this call, or just email the alias. But you can absolutely share this. I see the comment with anyone else who wants to be part of these communities. But this is our Bicep call, and we are a community, but I'm trying to make sure that you are in the panel so that you can receive not only Bicep, but other opportunities as well. And one good advantage is you only have to opt in once if you're in the panel versus, in the individual studies, if you're not part of the panel, I will have to work with you to get you opted in for the study. And you also will see other opportunities in Terraform and the portal, other parts of Azure if you want to be part of that research too. So hopefully that helps. Any questions on that? Okay. Well, if you have any questions, just email me, email the alias there. You can always ask in this chat, but hopefully we'll see you guys in that research, because again, it's very fun to do that. It's fun for you, it's fun for us, because we really get to understand your daily experiences, and also because you're in the program, we can share some things that we're thinking about as well, kind of in that environment. So thank you so much for signing up.
thanks, Jeannie, and thanks, Alex. We have these requested updates from the GitHub issue. Let me just share my screen so there's a little bit more information there. But yeah, I wanted to sort of pass this on to Alex or the engineers for those who do have answers for these questions. So there's the first one, and seeing how Bicep can be used to create, edit, manage access packages. And there's a little bit more information here. I don't know, Alex, if you looked more into this.
I took a look. If it looks like it's an Azure AD object or API of some kind, and presumably it's covered under the MS Graph control plane. If it is, then this should be possible once the graph provider for Bicep is released.
Okay.
So hopefully, Tom, I see you're here. Hopefully that answers the question. I don't know if you've seen the link to the details about the graph provider. We don't know when exactly it's going to be out, but it is going to exist at some point in the future. I'll grab a link to that.
Thanks, Alex. For Marcin and Anthony, any updates for increased max little character limit for low text content? and permit new line breaks in ternary for in statements.
Nothing that I'm aware of. Martin, you probably know the most about the max literal character limit.
No,
So
no,
you
for,
did some investigation
yeah,
there, right?
no. Sorry, say it again. I cut you off.
I think he did some investigation there initially.
Yeah, no update right now. We're not able to raise the limit. But we have we were kind of working on a long-term project that will make it a lot less risky for us to investigate and try some of these things out. So we will provide a better update in the future, and hopefully raise the limit once we kind of validate that there's no risk to the service. But for now, there's in the short term and to medium term, there's really no changes that we're planning here.
The second one, permit new line breaks. I think it's quite feasible for this to be picked up. We just haven't had the resources to focus on it. So I think for anyone on the call who is interested in this feature, definitely give this issue some feedback. Give it a thumbs up if you're interested in seeing that get done.
And I will put this issue link in chat. Okay. And then the next one, Anthony Marson, reasoning on why multi-line interpolated strings won't be a viable future candidate for Bicep.
Anthony, do you want to take that one?
Sure. Yeah. Personally, I wouldn't say it's unviable. I think the difficulty here is in choosing a syntax that is going to work for, because right now it does not support interpolation. And the benefit of not supporting interpolation is that you can just copy any old string and paste it in there. I can see the benefit for interpolation. We would need to design like a different syntax for it, essentially, like something different about the way you declare your multi-line string.
Yeah, because I mean the downside right now, I'm using it mostly with ADX queries for instantiating databases and tables after creating that resource, and it essentially means that I have to create a bunch of these single line strings and then concatenate them all, and that's not fun.
Yeah, no, I mean that's a similar use case to the the whole reason we created the multi-line like verbatim strings. So I can definitely see why that's important. Yeah, I mean to me, like I don't feel like it's not a viable feature candidate. I think we just need to spend some time designing the syntax for it.
Yeah, I guess that was more in response to Alex's post on it most recently of make sure that we're not conceptually against having the support in the language. So I just don't know why you'd be conceptually against it.
Fair enough.
Yep, glad we clarified.
And by the way, are you able to use the format function as a workaround for this? To basically use a verbatim string with some placeholders in using just a multi-line string and then just basically use that to replace the parameters? That was a question for Wit, I think.
Oh, I have not. Again, I mostly just use just a bunch of single line strings and then just concatenate them. Just from more of a readability perspective.
Yeah, but what Anthony just pasted in the chat with the format function would also potentially solve the problem for you until we basically design that syntax that Anthony was talking about.
Yeah, either one. Either one. I mean, I guess if I had the choice between them, I'd like the C# syntax. Just put the dollar sign in front of it.
Yeah.
But I mean, either one does about the same thing. I guess especially my queries span 12, 14 lines, so I can either put that all in one line with the format, or again just put a plus between them all.
Yeah, I think the one downside of the format function to mention is that you do have to be really careful with, if you genuinely want to use curly brackets, then you'll have to make sure you escape them in a way that the format function understands them, which does make this workaround a bit complicated if you are trying to genuinely have a multi-line string with curly braces in it.
Yeah, I mean, because the biggest problem I've got to deal with is more the ADX is very picky about the white space, so ensuring that it has the /r/n at every line.
I think.
Anyway, I appreciate the consideration.
Yeah, thanks, Marcin, Anthony. We do have this last one with that you had also asked about. I don't know if you want to give a little bit of information or ask them directly.
Sure. Yeah, error messages are useless. So, you know, template deploys, I guess mine's an 11,000 line compiled Bicep template. And I got an error the other day about an out of range error. And it said, you know, it failed on line 1, column 7,000. I flattened my entire template to figure out where column 7,000 was, and got something that was not anything about range indexing. So it says that you've got something that you're compressing on your side. It makes the error entirely useless, especially since upon investigation, it wasn't a range error at all. You know, something else just wasn't mapping to the right thing. So the errors are themselves utterly useless, and it'd be fantastic if, you know, one, you could just map it back to the modules and tell me, you know, this is the line number it seems to be, you know, having problems on, or just give me back the file that you're parsing against and let me hunt this thing down.
So
sorry,
Oh,
Alex, I was going to say years ago, back when ARM first came out, there was actually a way to run the PowerShell debug stuff to actually look at what ARM had unwrapped for the actual deployed modules. In other words, you could see what ARM, you know, if you had loops and that kind of thing, it would unwrap everything. And there was a way, it was a hack, it was totally not supported at all, but there was a way to see what ARM thought of your template before it actually did the deploy. I'm sure that that would help with this more than anything else.
So what you're describing, I think, is the validate API. The response of that would effectively resolve all possible expressions that it could evaluate prior to the deployment, which you can still do in an old version of validate, but we got rid of it because it was a way to expose secrets unintentionally.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's why I got yanked.
Yeah, but you can still do that sort of thing if you need. I think the larger point on error messages not being useful is a broad statement. There's many reasons why ARM template deployment error messages are not very helpful. I think the tricky part with source mapping in particular is the position info. Let's say you're out of Bicep and you're just doing ARM templates. The position info we would give you back for error messages, one, we didn't do it very often, and two, it rarely was accurate in the first place. So we could source map, but we would probably source map as incorrectly as we initially locate something. So there's just a ton here. I'm not saying we shouldn't source map. We should source map these, and we shouldn't have that line 1 column 10 million error anymore. But it won't. I don't think either of those will fundamentally solve the problem, which is why we haven't rushed to finish this. Does that make sense?
I think one of the big issues we have is when the error occurs within a nested module. And I suspect that might be what happened with the position info you were seeing, Whit. Because, you know, the essentially when the deployment engine takes the template in and it has a nested template inside it, we're really kind of like taking the inner template, we're treating it as a resource, we're submitting it put back to ARM to deploy the inner template. And through all of those different calls, the original template gets kind of mangled and minified. And then I think the line number that you're looking at is, or the position number you're now looking at is with respect to the kind of like inner template, which is evaluated. One improvement we do have coming in the future is setting the target property in our errors, which will help you at least locate which module the error came from, which I think is, you know, in the grand scheme of things, maybe not the greatest improvement, but I think it will at least help you at least narrow things down a little bit more than you can today.
Anything would help, because I guess I'm sitting here filling out this the survey here about you know, what do I use today for testing Bicep, and yeah, the answer is constant real world deployments to see if, you know, the change that I made broke it. which isn't great because I get charged for that. And then, of course, I'm using your resources just so that when the deployment finishes, I can just go and delete the thing. So it'd be fantastic just to have something more that I could, better rely on for if there's a problem, where is it? Instead of just constantly having to, make a tiny change, deploy it, see if the whole thing works, so that if there's a problem, I'm not just lost. Okay, in the 2 weeks of changes that I made, what broke?
Yeah, I think that is very fair feedback. I think error messages are part of the larger dev test story, to your point. There's just, we need to spend significant time on improving error messages, and there's a lot of different aspects to that. And some of them are quick wins, but I think the big meat of some of these issues are complex.
Any little bit helps. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
We are at time. We have one quick question. Any update around this issue? Asked by Benjamin Mitchell. Sorry, it's loading. Marcin. Well, I'll say I think it's on our list, but we don't have the resources to prioritize this right now. Alex, is that what you're going to say?
I think this is blocked on closing on syntax. I think there's a lot of opinions on syntax on this one.
Got it.
But we do recognize the need for it.
Marcin, anything to add there?
No, just to add to Alex's, I guess to add to Alex's point, like we have, I think, a couple of paths forward. So I think we will make progress here once we close on syntax.
Perfect.
And I think as a general, I don't know if we've ever talked about this explicitly, but I think one of our philosophies on this kind of stuff, new syntax kind of stuff, is to go really slow, like really, really probably painfully slow in most cases. Because it's just really, really hard to undo. So I know this one has a lot of upvotes. I know we need it. I know we want it, but just want to take the extra time to come up with something that we won't need to roll back later.
All right, sounds good. So I think I will end the call here since we are at time. People have other meetings to go to. But yeah, thank you everyone for coming. Really appreciate it. And I will see you all next year. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.